A man who spent years working steady, well-paid jobs on some of the most remote industrial sites in Canada, walked away from all of it to live somewhere with no road in, no neighbors, and no clear plan past day one. That man is Shawn Trudel, the carpenter behind the YouTube channel Cabin River Outdoors, and the real reason he made that move has almost nothing to do with the story most people assume when they stumble across his channel for the first time. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what pushed him out there, what's actually true about the rumors that keep circling around him, and where things genuinely stand for him right now in 2026. Long before any cameras existed, Shawn was just a kid in a small, semi-remote town in Canada, with a head full of books about trappers, Arctic explorers, and early settlers who carved out a living with almost nothing but patience and a few hand tools. He wasn't reading those stories purely for entertainment the way most kids burn through adventure novels. He read them the way someone studies a blueprint, looking for the actual mechanics of how a person survives entirely on their own terms, cut off from supply runs, fixed schedules, and any real chance of quick rescue if something went wrong. Those stories stayed with him the way a song from childhood does. Quiet for years at a time, but never fully gone. As an adult, he didn't become a trapper or a wilderness guide. He became a carpenter, taking on industrial and civil construction jobs across some of the most remote work sites in northern Canada. The kind of projects that put a person on a plane or a long stretch of gravel road for weeks at a stretch. The pay was solid, and the work itself was steady in a way plenty of trades workers spend entire careers chasing and never quite land. The trade-off hiding underneath that security was steep, months away from home at a time, living out of camp housing built for function, not comfort, watching over someone else's project, on someone else's timeline, on land that would never belong to him no matter how many seasons he poured into building on it. Year after year, on long drives back from one job site or another, the same question kept circling back through his head, refusing to fully go away. What would it actually take to flip the entire arrangement around? To be the one staying remote on purpose, and have the rest of the world be the ones doing the traveling to find him for once? He didn't wake up one ordinary morning and quit on a whim. He saved money carefully, scouted listings across some of the most overlooked corners of the province, and waited for the right piece of land to surface for years before anything in his life actually changed. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. In 2021, after years of searching that most people would have abandoned long before, Shawn finally found it. A 41-acre property tucked deep into a mountain valley in western British Columbia, picked up at what he later described as a bargain price for what it actually offered. This wasn't remote in the casual way a cabin an hour outside a small town gets called remote online. It was one of the only privately owned parcels in the entire surrounding region, completely encircled by federal crown land on every side, with no roads leading in at all. Reaching it required a multi-hour drive on service roads that could wash out without warning, followed by an hour-long river trip that the water itself got the final say on, depending on rainfall, snowmelt, and a dozen other factors no calendar could predict. Most buyers scanning that same listing would have walked away within minutes of reading the access details alone. Shawn looked at the exact same combination of facts and recognized the property he'd been circling his entire adult life without ever knowing its name or its exact location on a map. Before he ever moved a single tool onto the land, he made one more decision that would end up shaping everything that followed. He didn't just want to disappear into the bush quietly and let the finished project speak for itself years down the line. He wanted an audience to document the entire process alongside him, mistakes and all, from the very first cut of lumber. About a year after the purchase, once he had a satellite internet connection running through Starlink and a basic camera setup figured out, he launched Cabin River Outdoors with a first video carrying a title that genuinely undersold exactly how much was about to happen. It read like a simple, almost self-deprecating post about a guy buying remote property with no real idea what he was doing. That video didn't just perform reasonably well for a brand new channel with zero history or audience behind it. It set the entire tone for everything that came after. A channel built on watching someone learn in real time, with the failed attempts and the bad weeks left in instead of quietly edited out for a highlight reel. Subscribers climbed fast, noticeably faster than most new outdoor channels working that exact same niche around that same period. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet well beyond the usual homesteading audience that normally finds channels like this one. Once the cameras were rolling on a fairly regular schedule, the romantic version of off-grid life that most viewers picture in their heads ran straight into the practical one. And the practical version always wins eventually, no matter how good the scenery looks on camera. Shawn's own accounts of life on the property describe a boat capsizing on the river during a routine supply run, beaver dams repeatedly flooding the only walking path leading toward his build site, and equipment breaking down with no mechanic, no parts counter, and no quick fix available anywhere within reach. None of that gets solved with a fast trip to the nearest hardware store, the way it would for almost anyone watching comfortably from a couch. Every single solution out there has to be built from scratch, improvised on the spot with whatever materials happen to be on hand, or hauled in piece by piece across a river crossing that can change character completely after one hard rain falls upstream. Even something as basic as uploading the week's footage becomes its own small logistical project, because the entire channel runs on a satellite connection beamed into a valley, with no cell service and not even a landline available for emergencies. Isolation, by Shawn's own repeated description across interviews and his own platform posts, has turned out to be one of the genuinely hardest parts of this entire lifestyle, in some ways harder than the physical labor of raising a structure with his own two hands in freezing temperatures. Long stretches completely alone, no spontaneous conversation over a fence with a neighbor, no one 3 doors down to borrow a part from when something snaps in the middle of a build at the worst possible time. Just him, the river, and whatever new problem decided to show up on that particular day, with no backup plan beyond his own judgment. Winter sharpens every one of those problems instead of pausing them. Cold in that region drops far enough that simple tasks most people never think twice about, starting an engine, keeping water from freezing in a line, drying out a soaked piece of clothing, turn into actual planning exercises that can eat up half a day. There's no plow truck coming to clear a route that was never a road to begin with, and no quick check-in call to a neighbor to compare notes on how bad the cold actually got overnight. That kind of extreme, openly documented solitude is exactly what fuels a very specific kind of audience curiosity online. And it's exactly where this story tends to get misread by people who only ever see a thumbnail and never the actual channel underneath it. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. What's easy to miss is that this isn't a story confined to YouTube alone. A regional newspaper covering the Prince George area eventually picked up on the channel and ran a full profile on Shawn, documenting his journey from carpenter to landowner to online creator in his own words. At the time that piece was written, the channel sat around 70,000 subscribers. It has grown by tens of thousands more since, a detail that shows just how quickly this particular corner of the internet has been expanding even outside the usual YouTube algorithm bubble. That kind of regional press attention rarely lands on faceless or low-profile creators, and it almost never lands on someone whose entire pitch is built around being hard to reach. It landed on Shawn anyway, because the story underneath the views was strong enough to cross over into mainstream local reporting on its own merit, without a publicist or a press release pushing it there. The article spent real time on the access problems alone, the washed-out service roads, the river crossing, the sheer logistics of getting equipment and supplies onto a property that fights back against every delivery. It also touched on something a lot of homesteading channels gloss over entirely: the financial reality of leaving a union trade job behind. Carpentry on remote industrial sites pays well precisely because the work is hard to staff. Walking away from that kind of paycheck for an unproven YouTube channel wasn't a safe bet by any measure, and the local coverage treated it that way instead of romanticizing the decision. None of that reporting mentioned a wife, a partner, or anyone else sharing that land with him day to day. It mentioned a man, a property, and a long list of obstacles he was working through one at a time, on camera, for an audience that kept growing. And if you think that part was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is exactly why the whole story matters in the first place. Search Cabin River Outdoors online for more than a few minutes, and you'll run straight into a string of videos from completely unrelated commentary channels, all asking some version of the exact same question: what happened to his wife? It's the kind of headline built to generate clicks from curious strangers scrolling past, not to report anything actually grounded in fact. There is no confirmed wife anywhere in the public record, no documented partner, no statement from Shawn himself introducing one, on camera or off it, in any interview, podcast appearance, or Patreon post anyone can point to. His own channel description and his own Patreon page describe the entire project in blunt, almost matter-of-fact terms, making it alone in the wilderness, not framed as a tragic backstory hiding some painful divorce behind the scenes, not something he's ever appeared to be avoiding or dodging direct questions about on a live stream. It's simply stated, plainly, as the actual original premise of the channel, dating all the way back to before that very first video ever went live in late 2022. The wife rumor isn't some carefully buried secret waiting to be cracked open by the right investigator with the right sources. It's a side effect of how recommendation systems reward a certain kind of speculative question, regardless of whether anyone bothered to check if the question made any real sense to begin with before publishing it as a title. The genuine story underneath all of it is honestly less dramatic and far more interesting than a hidden relationship twist could ever be. A grown man chose extreme, deliberate solitude entirely on purpose, built a working business around documenting that exact choice with total honesty on camera, and never once needed a manufactured personal life subplot to make any of it worth 15 minutes of someone's afternoon. It's worth pointing out how this kind of rumor actually gets manufactured in the first place, because it almost never starts with the subject of the video at all. A handful of unrelated channels notice a search term trending, in this case, curiosity about why a man would choose to live entirely alone, and they build a thumbnail around the question rather than the answer, knowing full well that uncertainty pulls in more clicks than a flat, boring confirmation ever could. None of those channels ever interviewed Shawn. None of them reached out to his Patreon or commented under one of his actual uploads asking him directly. The question just kept getting repackaged, video after video, until it started to feel like established fact to anyone scrolling past it quickly enough. That's not journalism. That's pattern matching dressed up as a mystery. The number that came next, nobody who followed this channel from its earliest days expected it. Here's the part most casual viewers never stop to think about while they're watching one of his builds. Living alone in the bush doesn't pay for boat fuel, chainsaw blades, replacement parts, or a monthly satellite internet bill all on its own. Cabin River Outdoors works as a sustainable, ongoing project because Shawn built it like an actual small business fairly early on, not a passion project running purely on goodwill and good scenery. Outdoor clothing brands based in Europe picked up sponsorship deals on the channel once the audience numbers proved themselves over a sustained stretch of consistent weekly uploads. A solar power company followed not long after that, drawn specifically to a creator whose entire daily setup depends on generating his own electricity hundreds of kilometers from the nearest grid connection, making him a genuinely useful real-world test case rather than a paid actor reading a script. On top of those brand partnerships, Shawn runs an active Patreon page where paying supporters get extended behind-the-scenes updates, written posts, and additional context that never quite makes it into the polished main YouTube uploads. None of this required him to compromise the original premise of the channel in any noticeable way that longtime viewers have ever flagged in the comments. If anything, it proved the exact opposite point that a lot of new creators struggle to believe when they're starting out: that a meaningful, loyal audience will pay real money to keep following someone living with almost nothing, as long as the story being told stays honest and the person telling it never starts performing a character for the camera just because brands are now watching. There's also a quieter math problem behind all of this that rarely gets discussed. A property with no road access means every sponsor shipment, every replacement part, and every piece of new equipment has to clear the same river crossing and the same long drive that Shawn does. That logistics burden is exactly why a creator at his subscriber level can attract sponsors that smaller, easier-to-reach channels usually can't. The harder the environment is to operate in, the more convincing the product demonstration becomes once it's actually been proven there. A solar setup that survives a BC winter on Crown land carries more weight with viewers than the same panels mounted on a suburban garage roof. One phone call, one conversation, that's all it took to change the direction of everything that came next. That kind of earned credibility doesn't stay contained to a single platform for very long once it actually starts building real momentum. Shawn has shown up as a guest on Outdoor Journal Radio, a long-running Canadian podcast built entirely around wilderness culture and outdoor living, walking listeners step by step through the decision to leave a stable carpentry career behind, for a life most of them would admit they'd never personally attempt themselves. He's also joined live streams hosted by other off-grid and homesteading creators, working in roughly the same general niche, including a return appearance on a channel called My Wild Home, billed to its own audience as Cabin River Outdoors, coming back for another unscripted round of off-grid conversation in front of a live chat. These appearances aren't paid advertisements quietly dressed up as casual chats between strangers. They're genuine invitations extended by other working creators in the same space, the kind that only really happen once a channel has built real, lasting respect within its own tightly knit online community over time. It's worth noting how unusual that level of crossover actually is in a niche this specific. Off-grid and homesteading content covers hundreds of channels at this point, most of them competing for the exact same pool of viewers, and yet other creators keep choosing to bring Shawn into their own audience's feed instead of treating him as competition. That only happens when the people running those other channels genuinely trust what they're vouching for. As of right now, Cabin River Outdoors sits comfortably past the 100,000 subscriber mark, with total views climbing well past 15 million across only a handful of years of steady, consistent uploads. That kind of sustained growth, for a channel built entirely around one man, one piece of genuinely difficult land, and absolutely zero scripted drama, says something real about what a large segment of YouTube's audience is actually hungry for right now, in this exact moment. Not manufactured conflict between rotating cast members. Not a hidden spouse waiting to be revealed in some dramatic reunion video down the line. Just a documented, ongoing decision to trade everyday convenience for hard-won independence. Filmed without the polish of a studio crew standing just out of frame waiting to fix every mistake before it airs. Most people who only know the surface version of this story stop right around here, satisfied with the highlight reel. But the real story, the one sitting underneath the subscriber count, starts right now. Shawn is still uploading on a regular basis, and he's still building, season after season, on the same 41 acres he once described as feeling like winning the lottery the day he signed the paperwork. Those acres are still being shaped one decision at a time, one failed solution followed eventually by one that finally actually works under real conditions. The boat still has to cross that river. The beavers haven't moved out. The satellite dish still has to fight bad weather to keep the channel running on schedule. None of the original difficulty has disappeared just because the subscriber count climbed past 6 figures. And that's arguably the most honest thing about the entire channel. Success didn't soften the premise. It just gave more people a front row seat to watch it play out in real time. Compare that to how a lot of long-running outdoor channels eventually drift. Some bring on co-hosts. Some move closer to civilization once the novelty wears off and the sponsorship checks get comfortable. Some quietly stop showing the hard parts altogether once they have something to protect. Cabin River Outdoors hasn't done any of that, at least not yet. The hardest days still make the final cut. The failures still get uploaded right alongside the wins, which is exactly the habit that built the audience in the first place, and exactly the habit that keeps a channel like this from turning into the polished, sanitized version of itself that eventually loses the trust that made it worth watching to begin with. What makes Cabin River Outdoors worth watching isn't a scandal, a breakup, or a mysterious disappearance. It's the simple fact that a man gave up a stable, well-paying trade career to spend years almost entirely alone on land most people would never even attempt to reach in the first place. He's still out there right now. The wife rumors were never true to begin with. The business side is real. The sponsorships are real. And the isolation is exactly as difficult as he's always said it was, on camera and off it. What comes next looks like more of the same in the best possible way. More builds, more seasons, more proof that this was never a stunt dressed up for views, but a complete and deliberate redesign of how one person wanted to live the rest of his life. The questions that actually matter here were never about a hidden spouse. They were always about whether trading every convenience most people take for granted is worth the freedom it buys. And that's a question only the person living it can really answer. So here's the real question worth arguing about in the comments below. Do you think Shawn made the right call walking away from a steady carpentry career for a life this isolated? Or is the cost of that kind of solitude higher than the freedom is actually worth?